channel. I am not taking a break from my Ukraine updates, but I felt that it would be a good time to do another topic that I've wanted to cover for a long time. Please subscribe and write in the comment section for your favorite topics. Since February of 2022, every EU country has, to some degree, expressed support for sanctioning Russia and supplying Ukraine. Now, there have been differences as to the extent of that support and sanctioning, very major differences. We have seen everything from Poland, who presumably would like to send Russia back to the Dark Ages, to France, who keeps talking about off-ramps and negotiated peaces with Russia. But every government is saying the right thing in public, namely that Russia's invasion is illegal and cannot be allowed to stand, and sanctions must be imposed. Every government, that is, except one, Hungary under Viktor Orban. Orban's regime has refused to sanction Russian energy, held up EU anti-Russia actions numerous times, visited Putin in Moscow repeatedly since the beginning of the invasion, and recently expressed his support for the Chinese, quote, peace plan, unquote. While Orban's internal policies and authoritarian streak are scarcely alone in Central and Eastern Europe, his closest ideological ally, Poland, can be found in the forefront of support for Ukraine and one of the harshest voices demanding that more be done. So in this video, we'll take a look at why Orban chooses to take these stances that alienate himself from his closest allies, which will lead into a discussion of Orban's strategy and worldview more broadly. Because in Hungary today, the country's policies will reflect Orban's worldview and nobody else's. But first, we'll go through some historical background of Hungary and how Orban fits into that background. Hungarians originate from an ancient population that originally inhabited the forested area between the Volga River and the Ural Mountains. That's right, they used to be Russians. They first entered Europe either as part of or shortly after Attila the Hun's horde. In the late 800s, Aripad the Great, according to legend a descendant of Attila, conquers the Carpathian Basin and establishes a federation of united tribes. This is viewed as the establishment of Hungary in 895. About 100 years later, King Stephen the Great converts the nation to Christianity. Presumably, this is to gain help from the Pope in defeating his rival for the throne. Now Stephen triumphs and installs a Western feudal state, even speaking Latin as an administrative language. Stephen and his descendants expanded the kingdom, notably conquering Croatia, and by the mid-1800s, the king's income exceeded that of France. That, on the top right, is the Kingdom of Hungary as it existed in the 1100s. But Slavs are doomed to tragedy, and Hungary then went through a cycle of power and decline for the next 900 years. They were ravaged by the Mongols in the mid-2000s, but repelled them in 1285. Their armies fought in the Balkans, Poland, Lithuania, and Italy. They even conquered Vienna in the 1480s, something the Ottomans never managed to do. But this flex was short-lived because Hungary was then destroyed by the Ottomans at Mohacs in 1526. The country then ceased to exist as a united nation for almost 200 years until the Austrians drove the Turks out in 1717. Hungary was a poverty-stricken backwater originally under Austrian rule, but gradually grew more powerful when the Habsburg Empire was renamed to the Austro-Hungarian one in 1867, with Hungary gaining its own parliament, army, and internal control. Just in time for yet another crushing defeat in 1918, topped off with a Bolshevik revolution, civil war, invasion by Romania, Serbia, and Czechoslovakia, a military coup, and the Treaty of Trianon. On the bottom right, we can see the boundaries of Hungary before the Treaty of Trianon, and we can see what Hungary was left with in red after the treaty. After that, a traumatized country settled down under Horthy and tried to put itself back together and stayed peacefully neutral. Oh no, wait. In fact, they invaded Russia in the winter with the Germans and the funny mustache dude. Now that ended as about as you might expect, with the People's Soviet Socialist Republic of Hungary established in 1945. An anti-Russian revolt in 1956, the famous Budapest Revolution, was crushed decisively by about 30 tank divisions, and the Russians only left in 1989. So a few quick themes that jump out here are a cycle of power, but also a sense of being a frontline people, constantly besieged and defending a West that seems not to care about them and can barely support them. Whilst Poland, another nation with this sort of history, responded by trying even harder to join the West, most of Hungary responded by rejecting the West. Long ago, the Budapest elites built a modern Western capital, but yet the peasants on the estates, ruled by absentee landlords and overseen by bailiffs, lived about 100 to 200 years in the past. This attitude carries over even today, with EU bashing going down poorly in Budapest's middle and upper classes, but very well in the rural areas and poorer classes that make up a majority of the country. So where does Orban fit into all this history? Orban gets his start as the leader of Fidesz's party in 1988. I am sorry, I am going to butcher these names. And in 1989 shoots to prominence with a fiery speech on Hero Square demanding that the Russians go home and that elections be held. At this time, Orban really is democratic. Namely, he wants to be in charge himself. The only way he can get there is by elections. Additionally, he really is disgusted by the communist dictatorship and how it's wrecked the country. Orban wants to see a strong and prosperous Hungary and not a weak satellite state. From 1989, Orban's rise was very rapid. He achieved only 5% of the vote in 1994, but became prime minister in 1998. He then served as opposition leader until 2010, and then yet was re-elected to prime minister after the Liberals blew themselves up. Orban's tenure from 2010 onwards gets a lot of the news, but a review of his 1998 to 2002 term shows that his policies have always been consistent. In his first term, he attempted to put his own people in charge of the national bank, the public broadcaster, and the public prosecutors. He attempted to change the parliamentary rules to benefit his coalition. He fought with the opposition-controlled Budapest City Council, failed to show up to question time, and generally tried to disregard Parliament. He also reintroduced maternity benefits, privatized healthcare and agriculture, joined NATO, and most controversially passed the Status Law. The Status Law said that Hungary spoke for all Hungarians everywhere, even in other countries, and attempted to provide benefits to them. Namely, as you might have guessed, this idea of the Hungarian ruled was viewed with distaste by many of his neighbors. Orban's positions did not change in 2010, it's just that they were more successfully implemented. So what do these policies reveal about Orban? What are his, and by definition, Hungary's aims and visions? So first, I'd like to get this out of the way. Orban is not like most autocrats. Most are in it to either enrich themselves or enjoy power for its sake. They usually destroy democracy when they realize that in a democracy, they would have to cede to the opposition, which they would never do even if the opposition was to share their views. Orban is not like this. Orban genuinely loves his country and wants it to succeed. Orban holds on to power partly because he likes it, but more importantly because he is convinced that the opposition is really out to destroy the country, which of course cannot be permitted. And a quick overview of Orban's ideas on how Hungary shall achieve greatness explains why a Western-facing, liberal, tolerant opposition really is diametrically opposed to all of them. This does not mean his view is right, it does mean that the opposition really will destroy the country as he sees it. Again, as he sees it is not perhaps how it should be. Orban is actually a nice leader to study because he says it like it is. Unlike many leaders who had their real innermost ideas and concepts from public view, Orban says them right out loud in public. In 2014, Orban spoke at Bele Turnsad. Again, I am going to butcher these names, I am sorry. Here he stated that he does not see the state as an association of individuals the way liberals do. Instead, the state is to, quote, organize, invigorate, and construct the national community, end quote. Theoretically, this kind of state should respect traditionally liberal ideas like civic rights. In practice, the idea of the community over the individual as the basic political unit leads to the promotion of national self-sufficiency, national sovereignty, familialism, full employment, and the preservation of cultural heritage. If traditional liberal values get in the way of any of these, the liberal values will lose because the end of strengthening the community justifies the means of suppressing the individuals. Means over ends. Orban cited countries such as Turkey, India, Singapore, Russia, and China as his models on this speech. Later on, in 2018, Orban further expanded on his worldview when he said, and this is quote, "We must state that we do not want to be diverse and we do not want to be mixed. We do not want our own colors, traditions, and national culture to be mixed with those of others. We do not want this. We do not want that at all. We do not want to be a diverse country," end quote. As Orban sees it, to be Hungarian means being only born Hungarian. No immigrant can ever assimilate into the country. Hungary's culture must be defended to the last comma and never changed, which by default means no immigration. To Orban, diversity means the loss of everything that is distinctly Hungarian. To a man with these positions and views, it is no surprising that a Western-facing, diversity-seeking, and tolerant opposition really is a mortal threat. I want to make it clear that I am no apologist for Orban. I disagree with him that an immigrant can never assimilate, that a culture can never change, or that diversity is a weakness. I am only trying to explain his actions and motives. And these motives explain the obsession with large families and having many children to rid himself of the economic need for immigrants. They explain the good relations with Turkey to keep Erdogan from sending a wave of migrants over. They explain all the measures taken to weaken the opposition because the opposition is adamantly opposed to this view. And they explain the obsession with, quote, gay propaganda. Now, whether Orban really believes that Disney movies make anybody tone gay or not, I don't know. What he certainly does see is gay rights and gay visibility as a threat to Hungarian and culture and birth rates on par with that of immigration. Now, shifting to the realm of grand foreign policy, Orban's ideas and actions appear the most baffling. Why would a leader who as a youth fought against Russia now seek a friendly relationship with Putin? Why would an Eastern European leader generally buck his region to support China? There are always the options of corruption or stupidity. Those options do lead to the end of any analysis, which puts me out of a hobby. Besides, Orban's career has shown him to be not stupid, and he would not personally benefit from being a Russian or Chinese puppet leader instead of the dictator of a sovereign and independent Hungary. As I said, Orban is not stupid. Orban acts the way he does towards Putin for two reasons. First, Orban really has been taken in by the defender of Christianity, defender of traditional values bullshit that Putin puts out. Secondly, and more importantly, Hungary is in NATO. So if Putin tries the Spezielle Uwajerne Operazione, Orban hunkles down and calls in the heavy artillery of Uncle Sam. Shielded by our 800-pound gorilla, Orban can then make freely profitable arrangements with the Russian bear. These arrangements are rumored to include chunks of Ukrainian territory that is, however, just a rumor. As for China, China is too far to worry about. Why not trade with them? It doesn't really matter about Taiwan. It is simply too far away for Hungary. Third, Orban may have bucked his region. He has not bucked his ideological allies. Numerous political parties from across the West have expressed views similar to Orban's in regard to Russia. These include the Dutch PPV, the German AfD, the French National Front, Italian Lega, and then the MAGA types in America. The only exception on the far-right spectrum is Poland's PIS, Law and Justice. Why that is a subject of a future video. Suffice it to say for now that Orban's line actually matches that of his likely political and ideological allies in the West. I know that was only a quick summary. I hope you will now understand Hungary a little bit better. Our next video, of course, will discuss Wagner Group and the recent events in Russia, as soon as we know enough to have a coherent analysis and description. Please continue to like, subscribe, and make topic suggestions in the comments. Thank you, and I'll see you all again soon.